Good morning and aloha, everyone. My name is Rob Hack from the Hawaii Pacific Export Council. We quickly call it by the acronym HPEC. We're based here in the Foreign Trade Zone. We are a nonprofit here in Honolulu dedicated to helping Hawaii's companies export. That's small, medium, and large companies. We work on mentoring programs and do a series of seminars every year on various export topics. We're able to do this through a generous grant from DBET, and we thank them very much for that. Today we have several of our partners in the room here to help us. This program, Scaling Up Operations, is generally run by the Innovate Hawaii folks, so we thank them for being here. We also have SBDC here to say a few words. But again, we'd like to thank all of our partners, including FTZ, the Foreign Trade Zone, for this wonderful facility, the wonderful room, the audiovisual equipment, and what have you. So thanks to all of our partners. With that, I would like to bring up Mark Ritchie from DBET to say a couple of words about DBET and the High Step program.
Where should I stand?
Up here is better, yeah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Ritchie. I work at DBET, and we're the division that applies for the Small Business Administration grant every year to put on this state trade expansion program. And then we're able then to relay some of that grant money to partners such as HPEC, SBDC, and others. Just wanted to quickly go over what High Step entails, the Hawaii State Trade Expansion Program. First, there's three components. This is the first component, which is kind of export readiness training, and you'll see like every month we'll have some export-related topic that we'll be looking at. Definitely take these flyers, and you can see sort of the upcoming training that we'll be doing. And you can also go to our website, and you can register for those things and through Eventbrite and things, so we can track who's coming. That's the first component, and part of that component is the business mentoring or business advising part of this. And if you go to our website, it's part of, in addition to sort of these training, we do it in a group setting. If you go to our website, which is invest.hawaii.gov, and then under Helping Business, the pull-down menu, and go to High Step, you can read over how the export readiness works, and you can look at the training sessions and things. And also there's a registration link. And if you register for the High Step program, what that means is you're kind of giving us information about where you're at in your export program and the kind of assistance you might need, and then you will be contacted by one of our partner organizations. We sort of takes a village here, but it'll probably be the Small Business Development Center, HPEC, Patsy Mink Center, or Innovate Hawaii. And so if you want to get in our system, definitely go and do that registration. And if you did the registration last year, please do it again for 2019, because we just want sort of an update, like where you're at. Maybe you've expanded into new markets and things, and that gives us an idea how we can sort of coordinate resources to try to assist you on a one-on-one basis, and we use our grant monies for that. The second component is the Hawaii pavilions that we do overseas, and I think some of you may have gone to TIGS or FoodX or one of those, and we have our a flyer that shows which pavilions we'll be doing this year, and that's a separate application process, but definitely take a look at that. And then also we use, these are kind of the ones that DBED does, but then on the back this is Department of Ag, and these are very important to think of a lot of companies here too, and they do things like FoodX, National Restaurant Association thing, and we have links to where you can sign up for those pavilions as well. The third component is individual company assistance, where let's say you don't fit into one of these pavilions and you want to go to other trade shows, or you're just doing business meetings overseas and expanding, you can apply for individual assistance to try to defray some of the costs, which can be airfare, booth space, rental space, and things at a trade show. For this year, the application process is closed. It closed January 4th, but we'll probably be doing this next year, and so kind of keep that in mind as you work on your export development program. And again, my name is Mark Ritchie. I have business cards. I'll throw some business cards on the table back there. And if you have any questions, let me know, but I'll turn it back over to Rob. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. I'd also like to remind everybody our standard disclaimer that this is a public forum. We have a webinar going right now. We have the live audience, which you're all part of, and then we're recording this for our YouTube channel. So any questions you ask will be part of a public forum, and it's possible your face could appear on here. So please know that before we start. With that, I'd like to bring up or pass the microphone to Wayne Lyogan from Innovate Hawaii, who's running the program today. So welcome to Wayne.
All right, good morning, everyone. Maybe we'll wait till Rob gets settled and then we can start the presentation. But just like first day of class, just making sure everyone's in the right place. This is the Scaling Up Operations seminar as part of the High Step program. If you're not here for this, please stay because we have great speakers today, and then we hope that everyone learns a lot. Maybe Rob can go to the next slide. I'll introduce myself. So I'm Wayne. Actually, let me put on my glasses. Yeah, no, but, it took me a couple hours to find the avatar, so, try to match it a little bit. But my name is Wayne Layugan. This is my contact information. If you guys have any questions about our program, the speakers today, or anything manufacturing related, you guys can give me a shout. Probably email be the best because I'm in and out of my office a lot. So WLAYUGAN@htdc.org. Okay, Rob, next slide. So just some basics about our program, yeah. Innovate Hawaii is a program of the Hawaii Technology Development Center. We're also part of the MEP National Network. MEP is the Manufacturing Extension Partnership. So this is a nationwide network of manufacturing centers. So there's one in every state and Puerto Rico. And all we do is help small to medium-sized businesses, manufacturing businesses. And we do this through training programs and direct service. Our goal for Hawaii is to advance manufacturing in Hawaii. And then our three words that we like to live by are create, build, grow. So create jobs, of course, create opportunities for Hawaii, build the manufacturing industry, and then help you grow as a business. Sort of to break the ice, maybe we can spend some time just to go around the room, and also this will give the speakers that we have today some framing of how the responses can help you guys as businesses looking to export and scale up. Maybe we can start here on this side, and then we'll work our way around. Maybe just introduce yourself, your company, and maybe what you do a little bit, and sort of what your expectations from today's panel session.
Good morning. My name is Jeffrey Vigila. I think I wear many hats. I have several different companies. One, I'm a realtor, but also a investor in real estate as well. I've been in the food industry for probably about 40 plus years as capacity as executive chef, running major hotels from Ritz-Carlton hotels to Hilton Hawaiian Village as a former executive chef for the past 6 years. What I want to get out of this here, I also have another business where we take a look at farming. And so we're taking a look at how we can scale that up eventually or export it one day. We'll take a look at that. I come from a family of farmers back on the Big Island, and for me it's really about education and growing and understanding the process. Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Naoya Arai from the Aloha Outlet. We are doing e-commerce. We are exporting the Hawaiian products to worldwide, mainly Japan. So we are coming to see, how we can grow up our business here. Thank you.
I guess I'm up. Doug McKenna. I'm a farmer from the Big Island. I grow coffee, and also I'm growing olives and looking at developing that market for export as well as my coffee.
Velina Maya Oko Pakahiapao. My name is Silvia Benson. I'm here representing my father's business, Anelakai Marine Services, LLC. We do a bunch of marine services in terms of repairing vessels and trailers, essentially creating or building voyaging canoes. We also do a lot of on-the-water activities. like escorting and stuff. And we also have a products component where we just became the new distributors for an eco-friendly marine grade paint that is currently replacing the world's top competitor along the east coast of the United States. So we've been given the distributorship for the entire Pacific, so we're looking at expanding that. And I also have my own clothing line called Manifest Aloha. The whole idea behind that is to help to elevate the overall mana or energy of humanity to help to heal the planet in all levels or aspects. So just trying to broadcast that on a worldwide level as well.
Good morning, I'm Ashley Harding. I'm here with OO Hawaii. I'm still in the beauty industry, and I always learn a lot of good info at all of these seminars. Thank you.
I'm Tori. I'm from Ted's Bakery. We're located on the North Shore, and we wholesale pies and cakes throughout Oahu and Maui and Hawaii.
My name is Stephen Keene. This is my wife Megumi. We relatively new business. I'm an artist, and last year we did the Hawaii Fair in was it?
Osaka.
In Osaka, and so yeah, this year we're trying to go back, and I'm trying to learn more about how to export my art and goods in Japan.
Aloha, my name is Josue, and I'm the owner of Tech Armor, Hawaii's fast, convenient iPhone, iPad, laptop repair experts. I love technology. We're also a partner with Spectrum. In addition to that, we just partnered up with a company called Conversica, which specializes in artificial intelligence for sales and marketing organizations. So that's on the tech side, but I also love nature. And one of the other lines that we're also developing is called Diamond Wood. And it's partnering up with local artists in Hawaii, designing art, putting it on wood products, and selling it here in Hawaii. It's doing very well. Have locations at the Ala Moana Center, at Whalers Village in Maui, Pro Ridge, and Kamakana. And I just here to get some more ideas from everybody and learn. So I'm looking forward to picking up a couple of good gold nuggets and seeing how we can continue to expand what we're working on. Thank you.
My name is Ping. I have my own company. It's a very small company. I'm doing some repack in my company, but I wanted to see if I can grow to a small manufacturing. And then after I repack my merchandise, I distribute in the local stores now. But my view is I wanted to export it to China. That's the first location that I wanted to do because I'm Chinese. I did some, I was working for the local McDermott's company for years, so I have some experience for that, but I wanted to come to learn more about the export business. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Jonathan Braley. My company is New Island Feed Solutions. We've been in business for about 6 months here in the Hawaiian Islands. We are an exclusive distributor of a automated hydroponic feed production system called HydroGreen. And so it's applied technology to the agricultural industry, and we also do aerial imagery for farmers and ranchers and other solutions in the ag industry here. I'm here to basically learn about exporting to Japan and Korea in the future.
Albert Waite, I'm an artist and have a apparel company, Hardcore. Get that on the camera. And yeah, I'm just here to learn more, see what I can do with my business.
Noah Brown, I'm the distillery manager for Kohana Rum, and I also have a small mushroom farm. So just trying to learn how to get our products out there.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Ogawa. I'm here with the Hawaii Small Business Development Center, and we're partners with HEC.
Hi, my name is Aaron Higa. I invented a new type of travel pillow called the Dream Sling, and I have 3 patents on it. I just launched last year, and the way it works, it's like a pillow with an arm sling, and the weight of the arm supports the head, holding the pillow. I did trade shows locally in Hawaii. I did super well, and my product has received, good reviews and, well standing. And I want to expand to Japan. I came here to mostly talk to Rob because he helps people in Japan. So I want to do exporting to Japan, Europe, and just the world. So and to learn from everybody else too. So, yeah.
It's a great product. I can vouch for.
I could have used that just recently. So.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Randall Mao. I'm the Vice President of Medical and Business Relations for Cardax Inc. Cardax Inc. is a biotechnology life sciences company out of Honolulu, Hawaii. We manufacture, what we've done is we've actually worked on this project for about 10 to 12 years, bringing on this very potent, very safe anti-inflammatory for joint health, cardiovascular health, metabolic health, mental health, brain health. And it's a non-prescriptive product. What we've done is we've taken this natural occurring marine compound, synthesized it, and brought it to the market. We're now exclusively in GNC, not only in Hawaii, the 29 stores in Hawaii, but to the 3,100 GNC stores around the country. So my goal, or our goal, is to start exporting into Japan, Korea, China, Australia, but of course going through the FDA process. We do manufacture in Switzerland. We then ship the compound to Long Island, New York, where it's encapsulated, bottled, labeled, and then brought to Hawaii to distribute out. And someday we hope to be very successful, being the gateway, Hawaii being the gateway to Asia and Australia, being able to open up manufacturing operations here in Hawaii. So again, it's a non-prescriptive anti-inflammatory for general health and longevity.
My name is Randall. I'm from Shaka Spirits. What we're doing is creating a plantation distilled spirits here out of Hawaii made products, and we're scaling up for next year to export and hope to go into Japan and Korea. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lori Silva. I have a company called Napua Ala, and I hand make my own body care products. So I'm the maker, the designer, the labeler, everything. And so I've been doing that for a while. And thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Lori Hiromatsu, Senior Business Advisor with the Hawaii Small Business Development Center and partners with EBID, the High Step program.
Hi, good morning as well. I'm Dennis Wong. I'm a Senior Business Advisor with Hawaii Small Business Development Center.
Hi, good morning. My name is Erin Furuichi, and I work with Wayne and Innovate Hawaii.
My name is Sophia Lam, and I also work with Innovate Hawaii.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Joe Burns. I'm the Oahu Director of the Small Business Development Center. Some of our staff is here, so please go ahead and introduce yourself to them. We provide no-cost advisory services to Hawaii businesses. We have a few clients in the room that we're already working with. Specifically in the areas of management improvement, financial management, other types of management, export financing, development of an export plan. All those are available to you on a no-cost basis. We do have offices on all the islands. And as a High Step partner, we're very involved in this, and we have been for a few years. Some really nice success stories, and I hope all of you will become one of those success stories. Thank you.
Mark Rich from DBED, I think you already heard from me.
Mr. Rowe in front here. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Hitomi Uryu. I'm from the Hawaii Women's Support Center of Hawaii. It's an NPO. So we have a Hawaiian Fair in February through April in Japan. The profit is going to a UH Medical Center. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Andrea Weymouth Fuji. I'm an artist. I'm also the owner of East Honolulu Clothing Company. We manufacture a handcrafted, hand-screened line of men's and women's aloha wear, high-tech wick-away fabrics. We've been doing that for over 20 years. We also have a retail store, a retail location where we produce as well, and that's in Weymouth. And we've exported before on a small scale. We actually participated in 2014 in one of the Hawaii pavilions at the International fashion show at the big site in Tokyo, and we did get quite a bit of business from that. There was a lot of business that we couldn't take because we weren't really ready to take it. So I'm here to, again, get more into that market and really learn how we can, I guess, step up our manufacturing. It's really difficult to manufacture in Hawaii. There's no seamstresses anymore. It's really hard. We do everything pretty much ourselves in-house. We use some home sewers now. We contract out. I collaborate with other designers. And we do some orders with factories, but pretty much we still hand screen everything ourselves, and looking for ways to just, I guess, capitalize more on our intellectual property, export that, as well as, up our manufacturing.
Aloha, good morning. My name is Monique Wall from Hawaii USA Federal Credit Union. I'm here today to learn about what's going on in the industry. We're happy to partner with businesses, small or large, to help you as a employer to offer certain benefits to your employees with finance, financial education, as well as partnering with the community to offer any types of financial services. Thank you.
Jeannie Yuki Tomo, also with Hawaii USA Federal Credit Union. And pretty much our role in the community is going out to sit in place of all of our small business owners that are working brick and mortar and don't have time to come attend. Then we partner up with Joe Burns and his team and be able to supply resources to those business owners in the community. Thanks for having us.
My name is Brian Canavari. My company is BC Frame. It stands for Functional Research and Mechanical Experimentation. So it's working with my mind and my hands. I'm an architect as a background, but I've been creating a series of artistic products. You can find at a local shop here in Kaka'ako my cocoa planters, cocoa hangers. Coconuts are seeds, and so those are the small seeds to a bigger market. I also have bigger products and designs as well. So I've been doing the High Step program all last year. I was at this presentation last year, and I'm just trying to refresh as I'm expanding into newer markets and slowly progressing, and it's been a great opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And then, so Rob, maybe go on to the next slide. We'll introduce our speakers up here in the front. So with us, starting from my left on that side, Summer Shigi. She is from 10 Tomorrow. Next to Summer is Neal Arakaki from Menehune Mac. Then Ryan Seung from Honolulu Cookie Company, and then the other Wayne from Innovate Hawaii. I'm going to pass the mic down. Maybe you can start with Wayne. Maybe if you can introduce yourself, your background. For the companies that are here up front, for Ryan, Neal, and Summer, maybe you can talk about your company, where you can find your products, sort of what your company does, because I know there's some crossover here with the audience, and also how your products were made when you first started, and tell us about your first big order. So just to get things started. Or for Wayne, maybe introduce yourself. Maybe something you can help.
All right. Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Wayne Inoue. Again, I'm with Innovate Hawaii. I'm the center director for this program for the last 13 years. I've been doing manufacturing for about 20 years. My previous life, I was in Silicon Valley doing semiconductor manufacturing in San Jose, and was an expat in Asia for about 10 years. So kind of know the Asia market, and it's a tough market to be in, especially for US companies. But again, we're here today because I think we all have different experiences dealing with manufacturing and exporting, and just by kind of sharing that with you. And part of it too is networking, right? You're here to meet everybody else, your counterparts that are doing similar products. So it's not just about us talking about what we do, but please make sure that you network. And that's one of the keys that we found doing this program for a while is you need to network. You need to know who your neighbors are. You need to know what other federal programs or state programs are out there because you need to leverage. We are in a very difficult location to do manufacturing, plain and simple, right? We're in the middle of the ocean. There's not very many support organizations that really you can just cross the border and go to another state and get help. So my one thing is, again, partner, look around who your neighbors are, look at some of our partners and get to know them because in order to do manufacturing here in Hawaii, it's hard, just plain and simple, especially in fashion, right? It's very tough. Food, we're very lucky we have awesome, companies that are doing great food products. But again, you need to work with each other. And, that's kind of my main message is understand kind of what you do, understand your market, but actually, work with one another because, again, it's hard to do business here. And, hopefully we can share some of our experiences this morning and you can, take that, away with you and follow up with us again because, again, we're here to help. Okay, so again, enjoy the program, and I'll pass the mic over to Ryan.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ryan Seung. So I'm the second generation of my family's business. My father started it 20 years ago, my father and my mother, actually. So I did not start the company, and most of the questions I'll answer are probably within the experience I have. I moved back probably 3 years ago to work in the family business, train in it, learn as much as I can. And then before that, I was growing up in the family business, so not quite as involved. So our business is Honolulu Cookie Company. You can find us, we have 17 retail locations. Most of them are in Oahu. We have 3 in Maui. We have 2 in Vegas and 2 in Guam. And then on top of that, we have some wholesale partners like Duty Free. We have Bloomingdale's, Tommy Bahama, DFS. Our main business is mostly just vertically integrated towards mostly retail. Our wholesale partners are very limited because we are very careful in the wholesale partners we choose as well. So I'm the general manager at the company, and sorry, Wayne, I'm going to answer all these questions. I wrote it down, thank God. Our origin story, it started, my dad was actually an art major at UH. He had, he doesn't even know how to cook rice at this point, but he does have a cookie business, which is great. He's mostly focused on design, branding, packaging, but that's not to say the cookies aren't, high quality. And the ingredients that we use, from the chocolate to the flour to the sugar, everything that we use, it's all natural. So the quality is up there, and we always keep it where it should be. Is that pretty much it? Is that all those questions? Your first big order? Oh, big order. So, like I said, we're mostly retail. So our first big order didn't come from a wholesaler. So maybe when you have other businesses, when you're in that wholesale model, your first big order might come from if it is like the dream order, it would be like Trader Joe's or Costco or something like that, right? So we didn't quite have to ramp up really fast. It was a slow and steady growth for us because our orders came from our retail stores and the usage that came from those retail stores. So we can kind of dictate how we would grow, and that slow and steady growth did help us get to where we were, and we didn't have to make knee-jerk reaction decisions for anything. We kind of planned it out, and now, we grew to a certain point. My dad loves opening stores, so I think in span of 3 years we opened 7 stores. At a certain point, that might have been the big order right there, was our actual retail stores locations, and then we had to move from our facility over in Kalihi on Home Rule Street over to Sand Island, and we had to build out a new retrofit, basically a new facility to hold all their baking, packing, warehousing needs. So it was nice in the sense that we could kind of control our growth, and that's definitely a model we like and we want to stick with as much as possible.
Okay, I'm Neal Arakaki. I'm here as the president of Hawaiian Candies and Nuts Menehune Mac Chocolate. A lot of you guys know me from my Jaxi Corporation. I actually am the contractor for a lot of the state trade shows in Japan, so I've worked with a lot of you on export stuff. I also do export consulting and export trainings on a smaller basis. So our company, we're the oldest continuously running chocolate company in Hawaii, started in 1939. My family bought it in 1972, and we were a really small operation down in Kaka'ako. I think we had like 8 employees, 6 of them were family. I'm the product of child slave labor, working in family businesses. So at like 9 years old, they give you a broom. I'm the president of the company. I still got the broom. Okay, that's how it works. What we do is it's kind of a retro kind of thinking, but we think it's the best way to do it. We still do handmade chocolates. We run as far as I can gather, we run the largest handmade chocolate producing operation in the country, possibly the world. We have a 32,000 square foot plant over in Waikimilo Road. And we basically built our business on foreign export. At one point, I would say 97% of our sales was foreign export. Only 3% of our sales were in the U.S. or in state. So we're kind of a different kind of company. And we've been able to see the cycles. This is one thing that's kind of interesting, but staying in the industry for so long, you get to see the cycles when things are good and bad and how people react to them. My father was an accountant, basically, but he wasn't your normal accountant. He had this entrepreneurial thing. And he's old-fashioned Japanese samurai, right? So there's just like, you're going to go for it no matter what. So we worked through 9/11, we worked through SARS, we worked through the bird flu. Somehow we're still here. To give you an idea of how we learned to export, and we've exported a lot. I would say easily over $100 million worth of exports from our small little company. Our first large export, I remember this because I was still in high school. We had a large order for Japan for the Tokyo department store, and it was a bloody disaster. Anything you could do wrong went wrong. Okay, we learned through mistakes how not to do things, and so it's kind of an opposite kind of education. And if you keep doing this for, I've been with the company 47 years. You learn a lot by keep making mistakes and not doing it a second time. And that's kind of how we do it. As manufacturers in Hawaii, and I get to work with a lot of you guys through my Jaxi company, we run similar problems with similar issues. First of all, if you're a manufacturer in Hawaii, okay, you're crazy like the rest of us. But there are ways to get through this, but you've got to understand what you have and where you're going. Okay.
Hi guys, my name is Summershi Iggy. I am the owner and designer of a clothing brand called 10 Tomorrow. I have a retail location in Kaimuki, a website where I sell, and then I wholesale into Nordstrom and the Food Pantry Corporation, which has some hotel boutiques. So my product pretty much is only within the state of Hawaii, a few in Kauai, Big Island, and here. I started about 5 years ago, so I still consider myself a really small company. Right now, part of my manufacturing is done locally, and a portion of it, a very small portion, is done in LA. When I first started, it was using home sewers, just one actually, and growing to where I am now and the struggles through that. And I'm glad that you mentioned mistakes, because I'm not sure if I can share knowledge today, but I'd like to maybe share my experiences and hopefully you can gain something from that. I actually have a unique background. I didn't go to school for design or business. I graduated with a psychology degree and kind of fell into this by accident almost. I have a very heavy retail background, which is helping me now run the store. And then from then I dabbled into styling, freelancing, a little bit of journalism, and was mentored by another local designer into starting my own brand. So I'm learning along the way. So yeah, I welcome any questions, and hopefully you guys can gain something from me.
Okay, Rob, the next slide. Yeah, so now that we have some background on the speakers, this is pretty much our agenda for the talk. When you get a big order, how you fulfill it, some things to consider. I think of it as the 4 M's of manufacturing, so material, money, machinery, and manpower. In this case, on the slides I have supply chain, financing or money, capital, equipment, and workforce. So if you decided to become active in exporting or even increasing production, either in response to inquiries or as part of your strategy to expand as a business, you will need to think about these 4 main things: how to scale up your people, your operations, your logistics, and your finances. Okay, so Rob, maybe next slide. So the first part, when you get a big order, you also need more raw materials to produce your product. right? So getting the right product to the right customer on time and to the designated quality standards that you have is one of the major challenges that any company has as it exports or develops its capability to export. So this should involve a whole supply chain approach, from supply to key elements of the product or service to having manufacturing or service delivery available to meet your requirements. So we'll go with Wayne. Maybe Wayne can talk about some of the things the MEP network, the national network, can do in regards to supply chain.
Okay. Right. So again, I'm not a manufacturer, but we're just part of a program that really helps provide the infrastructure for a lot of the manufacturers that want to start manufacturing. Again, like I earlier said, for us here in Hawaii, we are at a disadvantage, right? Supply chain for Hawaii companies is difficult depending on where you bring product. For a lot of our manufacturers in fashion, right, some of the stuff comes from overseas, comes from China or Japan. You get materials from there. Part of understanding what your supply chain is really understanding your clients and where you want to bring your business. One thing that we don't have this morning, and I wish he was here, is David Skink. He's the administrator for the Foreign Trade Zone. How many of you actually know what the Foreign Trade Zone's about or have heard about the Foreign Trade Zone? Good. All right. Well, part of the Foreign Trade Zone is, again, which is really important for a lot of people that bring in product through from China or from Japan, is to understand the tariff system, right? So here at the Foreign Trade Zone, they have a big bonded warehouse next door that actually brings in products from Japan, from China, and it's actually a warehouse where you can store your products here tax-free until you take it out of the zone. Now, again, I'm not the expert of the Foreign Trade Zone, but I highly recommend you Google Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone number 9, and you can get all kind of the details and what the benefits are. So they have warehousing support. They also have their U.S. Customs here. They have a lot of things that provide that wraparound service for inbound products from overseas. So as part of your supply chain, that's a key thing, especially if you bring it, again, from overseas. From the domestic side, again, we're in the middle of the ocean. We have difficulties with transportation. So a lot of the things that we do as part of the MEP program is try to help you make partners with freight forwarders here in Hawaii to bring in your inbound products and actually outbound as well, because that's a key component of your pricing model is transportation. Your supply, you guys know where all your macadamia nuts are coming from, your flowers are coming from, but part of the challenge is transportation, and that's part of your supply chain as well. So let us know, we have partners that we can forward you to as far as like Honolulu Freight Forward. They have special programs for manufacturers, Federal Express, right? So, part of it is, again, understanding how you bring your products in as part of your supply chain, because just understanding where your products come from, but getting it here is the challenge. So, again, I'm not a manufacturer, and, as manufacturers, they have specific supply chain problems as far as making sure you have enough supply for the rainy day or for, upcoming holiday seasons. But it's not just the product, it's the wraparound service that actually you need to be aware of, and transportation is one of that. So please let us know if there's anything around supply chain. There's a lot of programs out there, again, that I mentioned earlier that can really help with that. So I'll back to Wayne.
Yeah, so I guess the questions for the manufacturers, I sort of sent them a list of questions earlier, but just to refresh their memory and continue the discussion, as far as supply chain, when you guys scaled up production, what changed in your supply chain to meet the increased demand? For example, like were the raw materials available at the supply levels that you needed? And how did you handle the increase in raw materials and inventory?
I'll let Neal answer this one first. He's supply chain master.
Just pass them back. Okay. I'll start off by saying that we all realize as manufacturers, Hawaii is a third world country. Okay? We have very limited access to direct supply. A lot of you guys are smaller manufacturers, are bringing in small lots, and it's like an on-demand kind of thing. You bring it in, you process it, you send it out, hope somebody pays you before the bill is due, right? That's the cycle. When you start scaling up operations, your supply chain has to reflect your expectations as opposed to your actual demand. In other words, if you're going to be sending, you're sending 300 or 400 pieces out a month by export. Suddenly somebody wants 5,000 pieces and they want it 3 times a year, but you don't know exactly when they want to ship it. Well, can your suppliers get it to you? And my answer to that is no, you can't rely on your suppliers to be 100% there for you all the time. Suppliers, if you're buying from a local supplier, they run out because their supplier didn't give it to them or their shipping schedules were out of sync with your demand. So it's out of your control. A lot of times, mainly if you're buying from the mainland manufacturers, sometimes they go out of stock and they won't tell you. And when you put in the order going, oh, you're going to have to wait 3 months. So one of the biggest expenses I've learned is that if you're going to scale up production, you're going to have to bring in more materials and hold it. You're going to have to pay for it. You're going to need the space for it. That way you can guarantee your production runs. If there's one thing that'll mess up your costing is when you have to start scrambling for materials, or instead of taking my regular cost for, let's say, material that I can buy from my wholesaler, I've got to fly it in now from Japan. Well, now you've got the cost of air duty, customs clearance, transportation, and those costs are actually now part of your product cost, and your wholesale pricing is now out of whack. So supply is the base to keeping your costing stable. Also, without proper material supply, your production schedules will go out of whack. And if you start increasing your production schedules, production time per unit, your labor costs no longer fit your costing model. It sounds a little complicated, but you guys know your own businesses. You know what I'm talking about. If you can make 100 pieces a day in 8 hours, and suddenly because of supply, you're paying your workers for 8 hours, but you only made 50 pieces, your labor doubled on those 50 pieces. Okay? And you may or may not reflect that into how you thought about it, but at the end of the day, when you start reconciling your accounting, you're going to, hey, my profit margin's not there. And when you start ramping up, it's hard because you don't know how much is enough. Okay? My word of caution is when you start export, you scale it properly to what you can handle. Okay? A lot of guys are looking for that pie in the sky. I want a big order, I'm just going to go for it. I've seen a lot of Hawaii companies go under with that philosophy by taking in too much supplies, not being able to handle it, not being able to turn it into cash, and they fall behind. Okay, so you've got to keep that in mind. That's you.
Okay. Well, that was great. I think I learned a lot. I think my industry is a little bit different than especially food industry. Currently, I get all of my raw goods from LA. I'm not big enough to be sourcing fabric from China yet. So inventory levels are pretty stable. If anything, maybe it's just a color of a certain fabric that has run out, but I have backup vendors. I've done several trips to LA to have multiple different fabric vendors that I work with because, yes, unforeseen things could happen and you never know what's going to be in stock when you need it. And manufacturing is different though. I do everything, most of my manufacturing is done locally. So it's local factories, local home sewers, and their output isn't made to scale. So if I wanted to scale, that's why a portion of my things are getting manufactured in LA. I have to make sure that I have the sales channels to even start manufacturing those 200 pieces in one style, when maybe a year ago I was only doing 50. And I'm still in the research process of getting more vendors in LA because I just never know what's going to happen. A big thing for me is I'm trying to control my growth. Most of my sales come from retail, so it's easy to manage, it's easy to forecast, and it's easy to budget for. And I don't have investors or people factoring my orders. So one example of a mistake that I made was I took a really big order into 6 stores, maybe about $14,000 of manufacturing costs, and I was super excited, and I signed a little line that it was consignment. So anyone who does manufacturing here for fashion knows it's a cash flow business. So I upfronted all the cost for this giant order, and then in 3 months, half of it came back. And thank God I have my own store so I can offload that product. But it messed up my production schedule. It messed up my cash flow. So moving forward, I run a really tight budget. I run sales forecasting, production forecasting. I even plan marketing in there. And then I plan my scale according to my timeline. So if I wanted to expand to the mainland, at what month can I do that? Because right now I'm producing 3 months out. So I can't even think about scaling till maybe the next half of the year.
I think me and Neal probably have pretty similar challenges. We're in food manufacturing too, so we have to hold a lot of goods. Like I said, we're in retail mostly, and that's where the bulk of and the majority of our sales comes from. So we can kind of forecast the usage somewhat because we know what promotions are going on. I'd say it gets tricky when the wholesalers do run promotions without telling us, and all of a sudden, our 4 to 5 days worth of finished goods are just taken in one day, and then we have to pull some overtime for that. We also have a ton of SKUs. So if you've ever been to one of our stores, we have, well, maybe not a ton, but there's a lot. There's like 50 plus retail SKUs at the store. So that's individual cookies, that's different packaging. So if you can imagine all of that times 3 months worth of supply in a warehouse, like you can probably come to our warehouse and see it, but it's a huge warehouse holding just finished our raw materials and raw ingredients. And we have to hold a lot of it because a lot of the raw material orders need to be purchased at a minimum as well. So it's about 3 months worth of stock on some of these products. And so we have like a 20,000 square foot warehouse, and I don't know, I think it holds like 1,000 plus pallets of just raw materials. So we have huge inventory costs, and it's all in one spot. So it's a little risky, but we have to have it because we produce so many different types of SKUs. What we try to do to mitigate the risk a little bit is some of the raw ingredients that we have are a little volatile in terms of, macadamia nuts. I think Neal knows a lot. There's shortages every year for it. We contract the pricing ahead of time, but still sometimes, the vendors can't meet our demand, or they can't supply it either because they're running out themselves or something happened to the crop. We always run into very similar challenges. Vanilla was another one where pricing it just goes up and down like crazy. Super volatile. So we always have to try our best to forecast, and luckily we can have some control over that because the majority of our business, again, is retail. And I think we're fortunate to have that as somewhat of our bread and butter of our business because we have more control where orders aren't going to spike like crazy. Other than maybe holiday season, where we already know what's coming. We don't know exactly how big the orders are going to be, but we have, year over year data. Collect data. That's extremely important. So we have tons of data and a team of people analyzing it, keeping track of inventory all the time. So I'd say the people part of it and having dedicated staff to handling the logistics, bidding it out, keeping the inventory records. We have so many people that keep track of that, and it makes everybody's lives easier because we know what's coming for the most part. And without them, we wouldn't be able to, I think, scale to where we were with just kind of a mom and pop style running business.
Yeah, so thanks for all the good points. One of the things that I wrote down was, I think Summer mentioned cash flow. We mentioned for the food manufacturers, a lot of supply comes from growers, and then also collecting data. So with those three things in mind, I mean, how do you guys handle, because you guys all mentioned the sales forecast. Maybe you can share about how you guys do some of your forecasting. Is it on an Excel spreadsheet, or you guys use other types of software? And also, how do you handle the chunky demand?
So the forecasting for us, like I said, we have the retail data already, so we know what's happening, and we put it on a retail calendar. So that's a Monday through Friday. Every year it changes. Obviously, the 31st won't be the same as the 31st next year. So we make sure we keep up with the retail calendar, and then that's how we can forecast on that end. On the wholesale side, we'll actually get commitments from them because we do seasonal packaging. On the core packaging itself, we can kind of keep an inventory level that we need to, but seasonal packaging, we definitely need them to commit at a minimum. And at the end of the season, they have to pull it, or they're responsible for it for us trashing it out. So a lot of the forecasting comes from the partners as best as possible. So like I said, retail we're extremely lucky to have it because we can kind of digest the numbers on our own and make sure we keep up with the stock.
We just had a discussion last week with staff. Forecasting for us, it's tea leaves and Ouija boards. Because when we look at our data, it's very unusual. I would say over the last 5 years, you're not going to bet your life on the patterns you see. Because while your sales totals might be where they're supposed to be, the individual components of what sold and what didn't sell moved around. We ran out of everything this Christmas. Let's put it that way. We manufactured things that sold, but things that never used to sell sold out, and we had to make last-minute changes in production to make up. And then there was a raw materials problem and supply problems and all those kind of things. So for my business, it's a little bit different because I'm actually our style of manufacturing, because we're a handmade chocolate company. It's almost like a bakery. We try to do it by fresh production. I do not schedule production until I receive an order. My lead times for delivery are 2 weeks, except for standing orders. And yeah, that will limit your sales, but it also allows me to plan my expenses. If we're going to do something extraordinary, or if we know something's coming down the pipe, like one of my customers in Japan wants a 20-foot container of cookies, we'll have to plan out for that schedule time. But we demand from our customers, which is why we're very selective on who our customers are, that we be given that pad for production planning and production scheduling and supply planning. I have the luxury of doing that because I'm an old cranky guy. If I was a young guy and I was hungry for sales, I would make all kinds of mistakes. I did them all. But I've learned that stability in your manufacturing process is where you live and die. Okay, you can take a great sale and it can kill you. Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, there is the real possibility of taking great sales. Somebody's giving you the biggest sale of your life, and when you pencil it out at the end, you'll take the biggest loss you ever took if you didn't do it properly. Okay, especially when you're scaling up from a relatively small size to a medium-sized production, which is a huge leap. The unknown factors are there. Okay, so trying to plan it out. I have a little different kind of control system. But then again, after doing for 47 years, you get a kind of feel for the market. So you're not going to be guessing all that far off. Okay, and that's kind of where you've got to make a gut level call. I think a lot of it is data driven, and a lot of it is intrinsic. Sometimes you're just going to have to make a gut call on it.
I have a really small team. It's just 4 of us, but because I do straight to retail, we do have a lot of data that I can lean on. So I'm constantly looking at last year's numbers. I do have a retail calendar where I keep track of promotions down to social media campaigns, email campaigns, events, and that kind of thing to show us what drove numbers from last year, what to replicate, what to get rid of, and what to expect coming up. I also have really solid accounts with my wholesalers, so that's kind of forecasted out at least for half the year at the time. But I'm really focused on retail this year, or for the next 2 years, I think, and forecasting out that production. And because I manufacture 3, 4, 5 months out, it's half based on data and half based on gut. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong, but there's always a plan in place for either way, and that keeps track of my budget. And I work backwards, just when's the deadline, when's the launch date, how much time does the factory need, when do I need those raw goods in, and then how am I going to get it here? Do I need it in a rush because something's selling out, then I have to fly it by air, or do I have the time to kind of ship it in by boat? And it all affects costs, and I'm always looking at my spreadsheet. So yes, Wayne, I have a ton of spreadsheets, a workflow spreadsheet, a sales goal spreadsheet, and an events calendar spreadsheet, and I look through it with my team, and we plan together based on all of those 3 things.
So this is an open discussion. So if you guys have any questions, don't be afraid to raise your hand, and then you can ask the panels questions, because I only have like so many slides, and then I only drafted so many questions just to get the conversation going. So again, the real benefit for you guys is you can ask questions for the panelists that we have. Okay. Yep.
For example, if you have raw material and then stock in the warehouse, how do you really add on more percentage of the cost beside the real cost of the material? For example, if you buy the package, it's like 10 cents per each box, but you have to stock that there and cost the space and time, everything. So how can you add up the
I wish I could answer that, but I'm not very good at accounting. So, we have a team of people that do that for us. Maybe Neal, would you have an answer for that? There you go.
Okay. You can get into the details of costing. I mean, there's cost accountants out there who can specialize in telling you how to do it. I find it impractical to a certain extent, simply because our scales of operation are too small and there's too many other expenses that are going to be flying your way when you run a small business, that it might be a 0.03 cent cost per month to hold. Because what you're looking at for, like, you calculate the cost of your warehouse space and you calculate the amount of square inches that unit is costing. Okay? And so you're going to add the cost in of your warehouse space into that piece. And when you sell it, well, you've added on the cost. What was the incremental increase? Sometimes you cannot micromanage these kind of things. It's going to cost you more money to micromanage the incidental costs. A lot of us, and this is the old school stuff I learned from my father, and this is the old school way, and to me it works. We actually will build in a percentage cost of holding. So we'll figure what's the average holding cost of a certain piece of material, and we'll do a general calculation, and we'll add it into the final wholesale costs. And sometimes we turn the material really quick. Hey, we made a little bit of percentage more. We held it a little longer, we lose a little. But on your bottom line operation, it really won't make that much difference, in the sense that you may have had to buy more cleaning materials for your factory this month than last month, so your expenses went up this month. Well, that expense outweighed anything that you saved or lost on your unit costing, unless you're holding huge amounts. If you're holding huge amounts of product, he and I are kind of in the same position. We got 20, 30,000 square feet of stuff that we're storing. Sometimes it's half empty, sometimes it's full to the brim. We can try to calculate it, but at the end of the month, what is it? I know it was at the beginning of the month and it was at the end of the month, but during the middle of the month, it came and went. Are you going to go down to that level of accounting? I think that's a waste of time. I think it's a waste of time. It's not practical. My father always taught me that accounting is one thing and common sense is another. Okay? My father was a really interesting accountant now, and I learned a lot from him during 9/11 when everything just fell apart. He says, accounting will show you, like driving a car, looking through your rearview mirror. It showed you what you did. It's not, you're just not looking forward. You're trying to make decisions based on what you saw in the past, but it's not always looking forward. He said, never let an accountant run your business. And my father was an accountant. Okay.
Any more questions regarding to supply chain? Because if not, then we'll move to the next part of the discussion. Okay?
I have a question. When you take a look at forward buying and locking prices in for an annual purchase, for example, that's something that you always do?
I can answer this one. It depends on what we're buying. So chocolate, macadamia nuts, flour, butter. We try to lock in as much as possible ahead of the year. The big purchases. We use a ton of everything I just named every year. So we have that kind of scale of our business where we have the power to, kind of dictate what we want in terms of pricing. And then on top of that, we kind of started to go direct to the manufacturer and the vendor as well. So there's a lot of distributors out here that can carry the stock, but they can't tell you kind of what the forecasted purchase price will be at. But these butter manufacturers, like for example, we are able to work directly with the vendors and get a more competitive pricing directly from them. And also the consistency of the order and the delivery and the quality as well. It's all there. And we're not just part of one big group of, one container worth of butter that's distributed to like 50 people rather than, coming directly from the vendor. And then also on top of that, the chocolate pricing as well, because it's so volatile. At the end of every year is probably the cheapest pricing that you can get for us. So we already know that going into that, and we'll work out the contract for the next year. Macadamia nuts are the same, but like I said, they still short us here and there all the time. So we got to send the crew of people out to Costco to clear the pallets over there. So contract pricing as much as possible is great, but for certain goods like flour, sugar, goods like that, we don't quite contract it out as much, but we do have a high frequency of delivery, and we do have to work with the distributors in that sense because we do have 2-3 times a week of delivery because we just don't have the rack space to hold it at our facility either.
I kind of agree with the cost analogy about looking not all the little things, because I kind of equal it to my past background as a chef, as a plate cost on food costs. You know, we have a whole plate cost versus we know the meat costs this much, we know the vegetables, but all the rest of the stuff we just put in a tier plate cost, and then kind of equals out to the sales.
Yeah, with food, it's funny. Well, for chocolate, he knows and I know it's a commodity, and prices change quarterly. And I've gotten into the habit of looking at factors that affect chocolate pricing. So I'll look at the weather in Ghana. I'll see if there's rebel activity in the jungles holding up trucks coming down to the port, and it's happened, so you start looking at things that you think can affect pricing, and you can contract for a quarter, 2 quarters, 1 year, and they'll lock in the price for you. But if you lock in at the wrong time, you're locked into a high price for the rest of the year. So a lot of it is there. Macadamia nuts, good luck. Contracts mean nothing if they don't got the nuts to sell you. But it's like that. Even for dry goods, paper, plastic, yeah, I mean, and a lot of those things you can't lock in. When manufacturers' supplies for raw material plastic goes up, they're just announced it's a 5% increase. You know, it's a take it or leave it deal. There was a time when you would order stuff back when plastic was really, really tight for our kind of material. You have plastic overwraps for your boxes and stuff, where they tell you the price after they landed the product to you. They wouldn't even quote you. He says, you need it, we'll send it to you, we'll tell you what it costs after it lands, or don't buy it. It was that bad. And those are the kind of things you got to deal with, you know. But we're manufacturers. Our IQs are in question because we're manufacturers. And so we accept this kind of stuff. But it's just part of what you got to do. You don't want
Okay. Any more questions regarding financing, capital? Or actually, the supply chain. Yeah, supply chain. Rob, maybe go to the next slide. Oh, I think maybe back up one, Rob. Yeah, here we go. Yeah. So again, when you get a big order, how will you fulfill it? This section is about your company finances. So getting financially prepared. Scaling your business is expensive. We all know that you're gonna need a lot of capital to do that. You'll need more space, like we all mentioned. More raw materials, more inventory. You're also gonna need more employees. We'll talk about that a little bit later at the end when you go over workforce, and also the time and resources to train those employees. So that means exploring and carefully evaluating financing options, which leads us to maybe I'll have Joe come up here, talk a little bit more about in depth about SBDC and the services they offer. It's a big commitment, so that's why we always recommend, especially for small businesses, that you find or work with a finance professional.
Thank you, Wayne, or Fred. So I think a lot of you can relate to what's being said here about financing. When you get a big order, how are you going to buy the materials that you need? How are you going to pay the labor that you need to manufacture your product or produce it? When I had my company back on the mainland, it was always a problem until we discovered something called the SBA. So the Small Business Administration is a federal agency that many of you know guarantees loans from a bank or credit union to you as a manufacturer. And the reason that the banks and the credit unions like that is that they're not at 100% risk. So the SBA has loans for export specifically that will guarantee up to 60 or even 90% of the loan. So fortunately, today we have Hawaii USA Federal Credit Union in the room, Jeannie. So afterwards, if you'd like to talk to her about export financing, I'm sure she could answer your questions. And then on our staff, we have people with very deep banking experience. A couple of them have had long careers in banking. So for your financing questions or issues or problems, please give us a call. We can actually help you with some of those types of things. And I should also say that we do have a network of other lenders that we work with on the mainland, just in case we're not able to help you place the loan here in Hawaii. Sometimes the banks are a little bit too conservative, let's say, being polite. And so there are other places that will lend the money. So one story I would tell you is about a manufacturer here a couple years ago that was expanding their location, new location. They needed some money and they were not able to get it here. So we did hook them up with a lender on the mainland where they were able to get it's called an international trade loan. It's a 90% guarantee from the SBA to the lending institution. Those are available, and we talked about getting that 5,000 piece order out of the blue. You're going to need to draw on a line of credit to be able to do that should you decide to take that loan. So this is just a very short introduction to some of you who may not know about these resources that are available to you. Our services come without any fee or charge, just like HTDC and Innovate Hawaii. These are services that you actually pay for through your taxes, so why not use them? The last thing I'll say is that if we don't know or can't help, a lot of times we can refer you to the places that would be able to provide the resources that you need. So keep us in mind when you get that 5,000 piece order that you don't know how you're going to finance it. Thank you. Oh, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Should you look for the sales first or the money first? Like, should we come to you to be like, hey, how do we want to get X amount of sales in whatever territory, but we think we're going to need this amount of money, or do we try and find the sales and be like, hey, crap, we need this amount of money in X amount of days?
So the question is, which comes first, the financing or the orders? So the answer is both. And the reason is because it takes a little bit of time to apply for financing, to apply for a loan. You have to send in your application. And no matter how much information you give the bank, they always want more. So, and it always takes twice the amount of time that you think, just because of the nature of things. So the idea would be to start that relationship with your bank, the bank that you're working with. If you're not working with the bank, somebody like us can introduce you to somebody. But start with the institution that you're working with because they know you the best. And start that process early, because you may not know how much you're going to need, but you can apply for something. And then while you're doing that, you're developing your sales. That order comes in, you've already got the process 70% done. If you wait till you need it, obviously it's going to be too long and you may miss the order. I know we certainly did that our first few times. So the idea would be to start early, and when you need it, you'll have that financing in place. And some of the times with our clients, they don't need necessarily, they're not in a position to need the financing right away, but we tell them to start anyway. Get that line of credit, not necessarily a term loan where you're making payments, but a line of credit that you can use, kind of like a credit card. So when you need it, you've got it, it's there. You don't have to pay any interest because you haven't drawn it down yet. But the idea would be to have that in place, maybe use it once or twice so the bank won't pull it, but have that before you even need it. And then increasing that amount is usually easier than getting it in the first place. So that's a good question, thank you.
For the online webinar audience, can you say a few words about Neighbor Island SBDC and how to find them?
Thank you, Rob. So we do have offices on the neighbor islands that perform these services. And you can go to our website, hisbdc.org, and find the location and speak to the office on the neighbor islands. They can help you with these kinds of things, hook you up with bankers or answer other questions and work with you on financing. This topic actually should be a whole workshop. So we're just kind of touching the surface here. The questions about costing, pricing, those are all topics that really deserve much more attention. These are some of the kinds of things that we can work with you on as well. Oh, thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. So for our speakers, regarding money, I think one of the things that I'd like you guys to talk about is how important it is to have a good, financial system, and also how did you make sure you had the financial resources to scale up, and then the third question would probably be when did you decide to move to bigger production or a larger space?
5 years ago, I am a Innovate incubator graduate. So I got my start, and it was subsidized by the state to open a small little office and start my manufacturing and to start my business. And their services actually came in handy. They helped with providing lawyers and seminars and work training. We even worked together on some workforce development projects. And I kind of owe my start to getting help from them. And honestly, there was no planning to when I scaled up, but I jumped from a 900 square foot office, which I shared with 2 other designers, to getting a 2,000 square foot space that was part retail, part workspace with Ward. So Howard Hughes actually came to us and pitched us. So I snagged the opportunity there. But I didn't have the finances to get through it. Revenue at that time, looking at numbers, wasn't going to cover rent there, and I took a huge gamble, and I signed that lease. I think Ward took a huge gamble on me, really. And we somehow made it work. We jumped in there. We opened the store in, I think, less than 2 weeks, and we started retail sales. And I was just praying that at some point this retail store was going to cover costs, which it did. And I had a mind shift. I was focused purely on wholesale when I was working out of HTDC's Innovate program. And when it switched to retail, something happened, and I really wanted to focus on retail. Fashion is fast, so going straight to the consumer has been really helpful for me to get feedback from my customers. I'm directly in line with them, and also to show them that I'm a made in Hawaii product, and so now I'm more invested in getting out there on a retail level and being really strategic with what people I partner with for wholesale, so that I can control my scale. And when we're talking about what comes first, money or orders, I almost think it's also, for me, I don't take an order until I have everything else, manufacturing, raw goods, and all of that lined up before I even worry about money, just because it's my brand and my name, and I want to make sure that if I get an order, I can fulfill it to the way that I want to on time. Especially buyers in my industry have ADD, so if you don't fulfill an order, then you burned a bridge, and that's an account you're never going to get back. So wholesale for me is something that I do very slowly, and I'm focused purely on retail and going straight to consumer. But yeah, moving forward, I hope to open a second location within the next 2 years. And so now I'm finally looking at numbers and being more responsible, but it's taken me five years to get here and to analyze data, and hopefully I'll make less risky decisions.
Okay. So I wasn't quite in the business at the point where we moved. That happened. So in '98, we started at our home roll factory. In 2011 is when we tapped out of that facility. I think we were running double shifts at that point. It was this tiny, tiny spot. I know the story of what happened at that time. So in '98, when my dad actually asked for a loan, I think he took out like $200,000 or something like that from the bank just to buy some equipment, just for the starter part of the business. But he didn't even have a recipe yet. So the bank would call him, every month and be like, "Hey Keith, how's your business doing?" And he would basically say, "Hey, I don't even have a recipe yet. We're getting there. We're building out the space, and we're perfecting the recipe before we go out." So I think it's really good that he took his time and made sure the quality was there before he just rolled something out, and that kind of set the pace for the business at that point. So from there, as we grew into where 2011 was, when we had to make that shift in terms of finances, the cash flow was good at that point. And then we purchased a building on Sand Island, and then the cash flow had to be monitored on a more frequent basis. It wasn't running where we had the health before, because we already were leasing the space. We knew all the costing, and we tripled the size of our factory in the next space. So we really had to monitor everything that was going on. I think a big thing that did help us was when we went from that home roll street place to the Sand Island, was we can lay it out however we wanted at that point. Before, we were growing, and we were just trying to deal with what was going on and fulfilling the orders from our retail stores. But once we got into a new space, we were able to plan. It wasn't the best plan, unfortunately, when we went into that new space. And then we had to go through several renovations to get the flow of the process out of a spaghetti diagram, essentially, from end to end. Raw materials flow from one end to another, and that essentially just saves time and money at the end of the day. So if you can kind of go into a facility, check it out in terms of something that's more scaled up in terms of your business, and you already know what you want in the future, rather than just kind of going gung-ho and doing knee-jerk reactions all over the place, because you know you need a clean room in the future for, you know, HACCP requirements and FSMA. You know that the process should flow from raw materials end to end. You know that you need a loading dock at some point. So if you have all of that in mind already ahead of time, you're going to save time down the line without having to go through the troubles of, you know, I think we renovated once we moved into that space every year until 2 years ago. So we kept growing and growing and growing and pushing. You know, we would push walls like 10 feet out at some points, and that would be a major renovation. We had to demo a ton of office space so we could put racking space in there instead. This is kind of going on the equipment side of things. But, you know, that also saves a ton of money eventually in the long run. What I was going to say was also, hiring a team was kind of the game changer for us of finance experts. We always had a finance and accounting team, but I'd say the key individuals that really came on and did the pricing analysis and, you know, were able to drill down where we had areas of opportunity. For example, we weren't pricing any of our products out correctly in the beginning. Our wholesale pricing was totally off. We were selling for cookies for, you know, cheaper than we actually made it for at a certain point. So we would lose money on every wholesale order until someone came in and said, hey, let's take a look at this, because we were just growing at this exponential rate where we didn't just settle down, take a step back and look at it. Once we hired people that had the time to do that, that's really where the shift in terms of our business and becoming a more professionally run business started. And that has helped us tremendously. And, you know, I give all the credit to, you know, our finance and accounting director. And, you know, Neal, you said accounting shouldn't run the business, but it did help a ton because we weren't looking back. We set the pricing. We knew that it was profitable at that point, and then we moved forward from there, rather than not knowing exactly what your bottom line was and what the profits were and what your margins were. So we did a ton of time study, labor analysis on every single product, and we knew exactly how long it would take, how much labor it would take, and how that rolls up ultimately into the bottom line pricing. And without that, we would probably be selling stuff at a loss at this point. So, you know, we really are reaping the benefits now, because every year we see the flow through of all the profits go to the bottom line now. And I think we've reached a certain stage in our business that if you reach this threshold, everything flows through at that point. So, you know, setting it and forgetting it, you know, it really does help in terms of your bottom line.
Ooh, finance is, okay. It's a matter of how much risk you're willing to take onto yourself. Okay, you can't run a business being defensive. Okay, if you get into a business thinking how not to lose money, you are going to fail. Okay, you've got to stay ahead of it, and that means you've got to take risks. It's not like you're going to be able to plan your finances to the T, where I do this and I'm going to get that. Okay, so you're going to take on the risk of financing. Our company was really different in the sense that we had a lot of support from the bank back in the day. I mean, we started our business in '72 in the middle of the tourist boom. If you had a tourist-related item, anything you made, you threw it out the door, you could sell it. There was nothing impeded. You were limited by your production of how much you could sell back in the day. It was an open, so the banks were in. You could get financing, just throw it out the door and 5 banks would come running to you. That changed a lot. But it allowed us to build up enough sales where the cash flow was respectable. And we were able to self-finance to a very large extent when we upscaled from an 11,000 square foot plan to a 32,000 square foot plan. A lot of that was actually self-capitalized. And I think it's kind of rare for companies to do that, but we also had some bank help. My old man always told me, he always give me these little words of wisdom. If you don't got the cash, you're just out of luck, okay? You can risk so far, but you can't risk to the point where you're gonna destroy everything and anybody. And you know, there's some people who think business is like Vegas, where they'll just lay it all on the table and go for it. And if they fail, they don't look at the collateral damage around them, and there's a social responsibility for that kind of stuff. You got workers you gotta take care of. It's just not all you. Okay, and that's kind of the philosophy that we come from. We kind of have a really old school philosophy about that. But when you look at financing, you've got to take on what you need as opposed to what you can handle. I don't know if I've seen people like this who took on financial risks and the pressure just ate them up. I mean, they couldn't sleep at night. I mean, they had a good plan, they had a good product, but when they actually get into it and they had to make those payments, and it really, really made their quality of life terrible for a long period of time. And I don't know if you're that kind of personality. Some people can just eat it up and just go with the flow, and some people just fold. So finance is more than just running your business. Finance is something that goes on you. Okay, you got to look at it that way, I think. But taking a calculated modicum risk, how much risk, and the amount of risk you're willing to take will dictate how much you can expand within that step or leap or wherever you want to go. And smaller businesses, I think, have a much, much harder time. Because right now, it's hard to work with the banks when you're small. It's hard to work with the banks if you're in agriculture. It's hard to work with the banks if you're in manufacturing, because we're not looked at as a growth industry per se. So there's very little motive for the banks to invest in you because they're not going to see these huge growths on you, and there's a lot of risk. So you've got to taper it that way. Grow at a pace that's manageable. Take on finance that's manageable. Yeah, that's about the only thing I can say. And if some guys, like I said, if some people are really the risk takers, entrepreneurs basically, you take risk, you get gains. You know, no risk, no gain. How much of a risk are you willing to take? And finance is probably one of the most solid parts of that risk taking. Yeah.
Can I just one add thing, and I think Ryan and Neal both said it, is the key word for manufacturing in Hawaii is scalable. So if you take one thing away this morning, think about how you scale, right? Because, again, a lot of companies that we've worked with or I've worked with, that's where they fail, is not knowing how to scale, right? Understanding when you need to increase your production, but at some point, you're not going to always have that level of manufacturing. You're going to have low periods, and you have to scale, right? So as a profitable manufacturer, especially in the small, when you get to this size, I think it's a little bit easier. But for some of the ones that are just starting up, right, just trying to get into the business, you need to understand how to scale. And, you know, that's just kind of what we tell a lot of the manufacturers that we work with that want to get into this thing is you have to understand your business and understand how to scale.
Okay, Robbie, we can go to the next slide. So I'm not a business person. My background is engineering. So from what I've read on the internet, you know, 3 basic strategies that a company can take to grow a business is, you know, either raise your prices for your product or your service, you know, sell more of your products or service, which is what High Step is, right? It's increasing your top line growth through exporting. One way that Innovate Hawaii can help you as a company or a manufacturer is by reducing or eliminating wasteful activities. How many of you have heard about lean manufacturing, Lean Six Sigma? So all those are variants of the Toyota production system, okay? We do a one-day class. We've done it with Ryan. Summer has done it in the past also with her group of designers. And pretty much it's a tool set, you know, very simple, very basic. It's also a management system. It's also a philosophy or a culture change within the company that, you know, it's a way to organize and manage your operations no matter where they are. So lean can be applied to any process. So Ryan could probably talk about this, but we did the lean with his manufacturing group and his office. So, you know, pretty much if you boil it down, lean as its most basic definition is the identification and elimination of wasteful activities. So in that one-day class that I mentioned earlier, we go through this lean manufacturing, this house of lean, as we like to call it. But today I'd like to just maybe to share, because Ryan sort of mentioned it, spaghetti diagram and wasteful activities. So I'll give you guys a little bit of preview of what lean manufacturing is. Maybe Rob, you can go on to the next slide. So the most basic thing that we teach you in Lean is how to identify value-added activity and non-value-added activity. So I'm just going to read straight off. Yeah. A value-added activity is an activity that changes the fit, form, or function. It's done right the first time and is something the customer is willing to pay for. So that's the most important thing. The customer is willing to pay for is a value-added activity. Okay. Non-value activity is activities that take time or resources, but do not directly contribute to the product or service. So again, with that in mind, there's a lot of examples that I can give out. The one that I do in the training is, let's say you're a lumber yard, okay? Your product is lumber, cut lumber. So the actual act of cutting lumber is the value-add activity. Setting up the jigs, cleaning up after you cut the lumber, that's all non-value-add activity. So again, which takes time, takes resources. You have to pay for it, which is all affects your bottom line. So maybe Rod, the next slide, please. So the common mistake that we always see with all the manufacturers is, for in terms of your operation, they say 95% of most operations are non-value-added activity, which is pretty high. So that means 95% of opportunity. So if you look at it, Rob, you can click one more. If you focus on reducing the value-added activity, like for example, the lumberyard example, if you were to tell the lumberjack to cut faster, you only get that yellow portion of increased productivity. Rob, maybe you can go on to the next slide. But if you focus on the blue part, let me just go over the downtime. So Lean, there's different acronyms for. No, this is good. I mean, this is what I talked about earlier. Then you can go to the next slide. So Lean, again, we focus on reducing wasteful activities. So there's different acronyms depending on which company you're with. Boeing uses Timwood. There's downwhip. But in our case, we like to use downtime because it's easy to remember. And pretty much the wasteful activities are defects, overproduction, waiting. So again, waiting, like for example, on an office setting, waiting for forms to get signed. So that's a wasteful activity because it's sitting there not doing anything when it needs to get signed. Transportation, inventory, motion, and excessive processing. So, Rob, maybe the next slide. So again, what I was mentioning earlier, about reducing non-value activity. One more click. If you reduce the non-value activity, you'll gain that much more in time to do value-added activity. So that's the real basics of lean manufacturing. Again, we do a class on this. We do trainings on how to identify waste in your process because everyone's process is different. Rob, maybe one more click. And then this is where Brian sort of mentioned the spaghetti diagram. So how would a plate of spaghetti lean your process, right? So the way we apply this to your layout, for example, is through what's called the spaghetti diagram. So here are two different examples. The one on the left is different workstations, 1 through 11, I think. And this is the operator going through producing one product. We had him trace his motion, track his steps. So normally we would have this to scale so you can actually calculate the number of feet an operator would have to walk. On the left side is a typical office setting, right? Different departments, walking papers over, instead of sending emails, you walk over to talk to them. But by applying lean to very simple thing that you guys can do in your process, your process flow, your plant layout, is doing a spaghetti diagram to see where you have a lot of overlap. Because ideally, maybe I can go to the next slide. Ideally, you'd want something that has no overlap, right? So L-shaped, S-shaped, U-shaped. So you see a lot of big manufacturers on the mainland, some manufacturers here that have this ideal layout. So for example, in the office also, if all the chairs were set up in a certain way, the paperwork can just flow in one direction. Yeah.
Can you take this to the DMV?
I mean, it's possible. Again, it applies to any process. Some of our Arden centers have done this for healthcare providers, for hospitals. In one example, we did a simulation with an organization that looked at their 90-day hire process. Okay, the 90-day hire process took about 27 days to process the paperwork, when if everything were set up properly, it would take 2 days. So the rest of the time, majority of it we identified was waiting for signatures. So this is the type of thing. I mean, I think maybe I can share, Ryan, about the office one that we did. I think for Ryan's company, when we did the office simulation, we looked at his approval process for travel, was it? And I think we calculated about, to get the process submitted and approved, it took about 483 minutes. Yeah, it took a long time. At the end, when we looked at the whole process and figured out where to reduce the non-valued activity, it came down to 11 minutes. So that's the type of savings. Usually, typically, for companies that we work with, about 20 to 25% in valued activity gains or productivity gains. Okay. Are there any more questions with this section? Because if not, we'll continue to the equipment portion or machinery portion of the talk. Good. All right. So I guess for this one here, I mean, there's Wayne's going to talk about some of our programs that we have regarding manufacturing equipment. For the panel, maybe you can talk about, how did you find the right equipment or contract manufacturer? Because for some companies, it makes more sense instead of buying your equipment, because that is a large capital expense, that in the meantime, if you can partner or work with a contract manufacturer to do some of your manufacturing, that could be the next step before you actually purchase your own equipment. Yeah, so how do you find the right equipment manufacturer or contract manufacturer? What kinds of information do you base your decisions on?
So I think the equipment side is kind of where I took to when I joined. I went to a couple different shows. I think my first equipment show I went to was Interpack, which was in Dusseldorf, Germany. And that was absolutely the biggest convention center I've ever seen in my life. I think I walked like 15 miles a day because I was going back and forth from hall to hall. It was extremely overwhelming, and I had no idea what I was doing because I was there by myself. But it did give me insight later when I really digested the information on what type of equipment is out there for our manufacturing, whether it's processing or packaging. So that's kind of like the two big ones for probably I guess any manufacturer's process and package. And so it gave me a really good landscape of what to look for in the future. I also went there because we were trying to find a more effective way of chocolate dipping our cookies. We did find a way, and it eventually turned out that the manufacturer and sales rep miscalculated the length of the piece of equipment, and it no longer fit in our facility. So it's currently, in storage for a year now, and that was one big mistake. So the lesson I took away from that was don't trust the manufacturer ever. Bid out the equipment for sure. Do your homework and find as many equipment manufacturers that do the same thing and bid it out to them. Because if you don't, you're going to put all your eggs in one basket with one manufacturer, and that's exactly what we did. I had a lot of anxiety during that time because I made that mistake myself, and that was like my first year and a half back. And I had to tell my parents what happened. That was scary, but it was a lesson that everybody makes at some point in their lives. And I hope the biggest lesson to take away from this is don't trust the manufacturer. If you can find an expert that would help you for free, and if they can't help you for free, you can pay for it up front as a consultant and make sure they're trustworthy and vet through those consultants as well. But because once you get that consultant and they do know the industry and they do know what's out there, it's going to save you some time and money because, your time is money too. So you're going to be paying yourself to do all this homework that someone already knows what it is. And that's my personal take on it. And we started to hire experts that know the industry, that can provide us recommendations, so we don't have to make the same mistakes again. And I think I'm biased because I'm a little scarred from that, that experience. But at the end of the day, the equipment manufacturer, they essentially want your money, and you hold all the power until you give them your money, and then they hold all the power after that. So if I could do things differently in that sense, I would have hired someone that was a little more professional. I would definitely take more time to make that decision. And that was somewhat of a knee-jerk reaction where, we were receiving a deal and along those lines, and that deal was too hard to pass up. And then we made the decision, and then it was ultimately the wrong decision to make. So take as much time and do your homework before you make any equipment purchases. But once you do have that piece of equipment in there, it does save a ton of time. So smaller pieces of equipment that we've purchased over the years have saved us a ton of time. All we do is essentially, you calculate how much labor that goes into one activity. For example, pan washing was a big one for us. We have a lot of pans that we bake cookies on. Simply, we would spend, I don't even know what the labor count was, but we paid back these 2 pan washers in 6 months. So it's really easy to calculate. And once you get to a certain scale where you're just taking too much time to do one activity, you could look for a piece of equipment, or you could add bodies to it as well. Or you could shift those bodies to something more effective for their use of time and just have a piece of equipment do it as well. Once again, what I said was the biggest takeaway is don't rush your decision, find the consultant, and don't trust the equipment manufacturer. Bid out the equipment RFP. Don't try to do it yourself until you have a good grasp of what's out there. I think because of that and the amount of research I did after that, I have been pretty well versed in terms of equipment now, and I feel fairly comfortable, but I still do want someone to lean on where they know the tiny details, whether that's this is how much power you do, make sure you have your transformer sized to this amount, because if you put this equipment in and it's taking up more power than you could actually deliver, that's a huge piece. You can't even put it in your factory. You have to do renovations, sizing it, output, make sure you forecast ahead of time, several years down the line so you can grow into it rather than just getting it and then next year you have to get another piece. Our growth model was essentially adding more of the same equipment because we have the same process from when we started in 98. All we do is, I think we started with 2 rack ovens. Now we have 12 rack ovens. So we just kept adding the same pieces of equipment on top of our current process, and it didn't really make it flow any smoother, but we do have a lot of SKUs and flavors. So we do have the flexibility to turn out any type of flavor at any given time because we have so many of the same pieces of equipment that flow down the same process line. And then on top of that, this last question is, what kind of projections did you have to justify the pieces of equipment? So once you get to a certain threshold and you realize that you are doing that where you are buying the same pieces of equipment, then you can kind of really take a look at, hey, does this make sense for our business? Our projections are solely based on retail, once again, and wholesale. So we did have a good grasp on where we were going and the growth rate that we were seeing year over year. So I think, at the end of the day, Hawaii is really hard to get to. A lot of equipment manufacturers do want to travel here because it's Hawaii. Every time I meet somebody, they're like, can we come? Can I be your salesperson? And it's funny because most of these manufacturers are going to the middle of nowhere in cornfields, and that's where most of these manufacturing plants are because nobody wants to manufacture in Hawaii because it's so expensive. But when they do find that manufacturer, they're willing to go head over heels for you. But don't mistake that for that they have your best interest in mind, because more often than not they're trying to make the sale. And I don't want to bad talk a lot of equipment manufacturers, but that's the experience I've had for multiple, and you really need someone that has your back, and an expert would be someone that would be that type of person.
I agree. I totally agree. From our factory, and we run production, it's different from theirs, but we run production. Equipment, I'm going to tell you what I'm seeing is we're losing our labor force. So things traditionally done by hand, you're not going to find the bodies to do it. And that's just where it's going to go in manufacturing. So I think everyone who's doing any kind of manufacturing has to look at what kind of mechanized options there are. A lot of times, most of the equipment is so big, you're going to buy this big monstrous piece of equipment. You're going to turn it on for 7 hours a week, and that's it. That's all you need, and you're going to be wasting your money. Okay. No, if you're going to buy a piece of equipment, know what are you going to use it for. Okay, and you got to look at it all the way around, not just what its productivity is, what's its maintenance. We have a little bit of a different feel for equipment. I look at equipment, I can find various pieces of equipment to do the job. I want to know which one's the easiest to maintain. If there's one thing I've learned in Hawaii is, if you buy a nice piece of equipment from Europe, you try to get it fixed. You try, okay? You buy equipment from Asia. There's some great equipment in Asia. You try to get it fixed. Rule number one, the rest of the world is metric. We're not, okay? There's a company I know on Maui, and they were doing bottling, and they bought in a beautiful bottling line from Italy. And when they got it, they unpacked it. All the manuals were in Italian. So they had to call up the factory. Nobody at the factory spoke English. It took them 9.5 months to set up the line, working with a dictionary, working with translators. And right now the line works beautifully but it was just a nightmare to set up. I have a rule at my factory. I love low tech. I hate anything high tech because I got to fix it. 95% of my line is run by belts, pulleys, timing chains. I can fix it with a bobby pin and duct tape. Okay, but I do have 2 digital wrappers from London. Okay, because I want to run a special film barrier around my boxes. I use a much higher grade wrapping film, and U.S. machines weren't cutting it. So I brought these machines in from London. We brought them incrementally one at a time, and we set it up on the line. They work beautifully when they work. To this day, if I need a part, I can't identify which part exactly is the part that needs to be fixed because we don't have any techs in state. So I've got a color guy in California who has to fly in and check the machine, and then we have to order the part from London. Okay, and if the part takes 2 weeks to come in, well, this guy's flying back to California. I've got to bring him back in again, and you're paying him for his flight, his time. So a $400 part cost me $7,000 to fix. Okay, and these are the kind of things. There's a lot of bells and whistles. It looks really pretty when it's out there in the showrooms and stuff, but is it what you can handle, what you can use? That's what I'm saying. I don't see very much need for sophisticated equipment in Hawaii, in the sense that a lot of these machines that you see out there are over-spec'd. You're never going to use all the features that these machines can do for you. So be very careful about that. It sounds really good. The other thing you've got to think about is when you buy a piece of equipment, what's its payback time? Okay, are you going to get enough cost savings or productivity off of this new machine that you'll be able to pay back for the machine within a reasonable amount of time? Every company has a little different rule on that. Mine is 3 years. If I can't save enough productivity on a major piece of equipment in 3 years, I'm not going to buy the piece of equipment. I'll try to look for another solution. And that's kind of what it is. And I've got several pieces of pretty good sized equipment in my place. But we have to be sure we get the use out of it. I know a company that bought a beautiful, beautiful cookie forming machine off the mainland, and it could do everything. And he didn't have enough sales to run the machine more than 2 days a week. So he just wasted a hell of a lot of time and a hell of a lot of money setting up the machine, putting it on the line, and his workers got nothing to do except, the cookies are done. And he's got an issue now. Now he's got, how is he going to schedule his labor? So did he get rid of workers? Well, he's got nobody to pack now, so he's got to bring them back in. So he's just shifted his cost. He shifted his cost, but he didn't get any savings out of it. So you got to look at the whole line when you look at equipment. Okay.
Can I interject? Neal brings up some really good points. In my day job, I'm often asked to help companies find machinery, particularly from China, but sometimes from Korea, Taiwan. And I find that our companies here in Hawaii are not pushing the equipment suppliers enough on topics like this to stock necessary spare parts here locally, or to have somebody trained here that can work on the machinery, or what is the plan to get technical service staff here to fix the machinery. I find that our companies are not aggressive enough at pushing for that. So please keep an eye on that and get the
consumable spare parts stocked here locally, because often if you buy a machine, it might be the only one here in Hawaii. And keep an eye on that, especially if you're on a neighbor island. You very likely have the only one, so please watch that.
So most of my manufacturing is done outside. So the equipment that I do have in-house, I've bought used from factories that closed. I procure them one at a time. They're old, and I don't look for anything new, especially because there's only one guy on the island who fixes sewing machines. So if I buy anything new, I don't know if I could get it fixed or maintained in that way. But I do need machines for sampling because I do contract out. So all I focus on is doing a really good salesman sample, and I work with local factories here, which factories take people. Sewing is still a people industry. There are new tech where machines can sew without a person sitting there, but I don't know of any factory that's using that on a large scale, and I couldn't afford it, one, for myself. And it takes up a lot of space. Fabric, machines, and people. So the manufacturing for fashion in Hawaii is dying. My main sewer is in her 60s. And I don't know where the new workforce is going to come through. I don't have all the answers on where it's going. I'd like to still think it's an industry we can continue if we change the model of what a factory looks like. Students come out of school not wanting to be a sewer, but wanting to be a designer. So maybe if we changed what a factory looks like in that way, we could survive. That being said, I am looking to scale my business. So I am farming out manufacturing and testing different markets, not locally, just to cover my bases. But my main takeaway is that because it's a people business, I work very closely with my factories and I treat them like family. I'm still very small compared to the Tory Richards and the Jams and the Ren Spooners. So anything I take them is almost like them doing a favor to me. Even though I'm producing in the 200 to 500 range, I'm still really small. And the same when I go to LA, I'm even smaller there. But my word of caution is that, manufacturers are notorious for screwing you over, whether you take it to LA and they produce your order in China and then try to bring it back to you, and somehow your fabric's different, your pattern looks different, the quality's different. So doing your footwork, doing your homework, seeing if they're willing to just test samples, confirmation. And I think communication is the biggest. So the factories that I value the most are the ones that are going to keep in communication with me and that we have a good rapport with. And that's the ones that I hold on to. So I'm still currently trying to build up my network of manufacturers, and it's really hard. When I first started, I was wandering around Chinatown and Kalihi just listening for sewing machines and walking in blind and trying to make that human connection to see if they could maybe take my small order. And it hasn't changed 5 years later in LA. There's no giant directory of fabric vendors and sewers. It's kind of this underground network because most of it's immigrant work. So it's hard. And I try to use my connections, grow my network. And yeah, the footwork at this point is still up to me. And maybe in the future there are consultants that I can hire, but for now, I really like being the face of my business and building that human connection and finding vendors that I can trust. And it's slow, but I'm working on it.
Oh, I think I was going to add one more thing. So more recently, based on the experience I had and the nightmare experience I had before, I definitely do a lot more testing before I even get close to even purchasing whatsoever. So I'll need an exact same replica of my product or my product running on that line. It's easy to say that, but a lot of these vendors won't. They'll say they've worked with your product before. They know they can do it. They are promising all these things. But for, a blessing and a curse for our product is it's a pineapple shape. It's really different from a round cookie or a rectangular or a square, because those fall uniformly and they're more predictable in the way they run on a conveyor belt or, the way they're cut and they hit a panner and whatnot. So for me right now, any future equipment purchase that we're going to do, I am heavily involved in making sure I can get the exact replica of the product on whatever process change that we're going to do in the future or whatever line we're going to use it on. And then on top of that, we're willing to pay to fly out there to see it work before we even sign a contract as well. And then on top of that, we have to do a factory acceptance test. So once they're done with the equipment, we make sure it works before it's shipped to us because, like Neal said, you have to pay for them to fly out here. So you might as well do it over there all at once and then give it the go ahead and it's okay to run, and then you can bring it over and make sure you bring your obviously some of your team, your manufacturing operations managers, because they know the equipment best, or the operators even, because without them, you won't know the little nuances. For example, I actually purchased a piece of equipment where I probably shot myself in the foot with that exact advice I gave, where I purchased this flow wrapper. It's great, and I tested a lot with them. I knew it would work, but once it got to our factory, a tiny detail was when we feed the cookies into this flow wrapper, you put it on a lug chain. So this lug pushes the cookie into a wrapping forming box, and then it forms it, seals it, cuts it. These lugs, because they're hand loaded, were a little higher than we anticipated. I didn't think to look at this detail of a lug, and our operators were having trouble because their fingers were getting hit by these lugs every time they would pass, and they're wrapping at 180 pieces a minute, 200 pieces a minute, and when that thing's zipping by, it kind of hurts your hand. And so we had to modify that entire chain. It took several months before we could actually get it up to speed to where we want it. But that's a detail that I overlooked myself because I didn't think it was that big of a deal. But the operator would have known right there and then when they're feeding the cookies into this lug chain that this was a big deal and, hey, you should change this before it comes out. So we actually have a second wrapper coming in from that same manufacturer. I already changed it for that second one machine, which was great because we staggered the orders a little bit. So all the changes that we are making to this first one can already be made on the second one coming in, and we could just retrofit the first one after.
Can I just make an additional comment? I think a lot of these bigger manufacturers, right, big machinery, a lot of them handmade. But regardless of what you think is going to happen, 5-10 years is semi-automation, right? Just think about it. Just think about right now we have 3D printers, right? When 3D printing for manufacturing came out maybe 5-10 years ago, $40K, one 3D printer. Right now it's like less than $1,000. And from a federal program or from a manufacturing consultant standpoint, that's kind of the way of the future. So not that we have to implement that now in your current manufacturing, but it's out there and it's coming. So we'll talk about, workforce. I think that's the next subject. But at some point, semi-automation is coming, collaborative robots. It's not a real pleasant subject to some people. But again, we have a workforce issue, which is a good segue to what Wayne's going to talk about. But it's just something to think about because, a lot of the things are handmade, but we're going to come across this time in the next, 10 years that you're going to need some semi-automated machinery to help in manufacturing. And it's just to be competitive, right? The mainland's doing it, right? They're doing it in China. They're doing it in Japan. It's automation. It's coming. Regardless if we're ready for it, it's going to come. So just wanted to throw that out there because at some point, it is going to come down and you're going to have to evaluate what kind of equipment to purchase, whether it's a fully automated machine or a semi-automated machine. So just something to think about.
Yeah, so to pretty much sum up this section, I do want to go over the Manufacturing Assistance Program. How many of you have heard of that before? Okay, maybe one. Okay, Rob, maybe go to the next slide, please. So in short, the Manufacturing Assistance Program, it's a state pretty much reimbursement grant. It's for FY19, this fiscal year, state fiscal year, we have $1 million in funding. It's a reimbursement award for up to 20% of qualified manufacturing expenses. The eligibility period would be for your purchases would be you'd have to be purchased on or after July 1st, 2015. The minimum grant award that we can give is $1,500. The maximum is $100,000, and it's one grant award per company per year. Okay, Rob, maybe next slide, please. So As far as qualified manufacturing expenses, these four categories would qualify or be eligible for reimbursement. So the purchase of manufacturing equipment, training on the use of manufacturing equipment. So in the examples that they talked about earlier, when you have your equipment in, usually they send a rep or a technician out to help install and train the operators. That part could be reimbursable. Energy efficiency projects in your manufacturing area. And then the last one would be studying or planning a new manufacturing facility. So for a lot of you smaller folks that are looking to expand into your own facility, if you were to hire a third party to do a feasibility study or do some planning, those costs could be reimbursable under this grant. Okay. Next slide, Rob. So the applications are available now. We are accepting applications until March 15th. You can go to the hcdc.org/money/#map, and the application is online. Rob, you can go to the next slide and hit click for the animation. So this is our website. When you go to that link, just click, I think. There you go. Yeah, so you click, you scroll down. It gives you an overview again of what I just went over. Stats from last year. So it is a highly competitive program because 51 applications came in last year, only 29 were funded. This is an old slide. The applications are now open. It's not, I think up there says closed, but there's a link to the application from here. And then, Rob, maybe the next slide you can go. And so how to apply, again, that's the link up there. Because this is a state grant, it does go through review committee and it has to meet some state requirements. So for example, as a manufacturer or business in Hawaii, we do require that you are in good standing with the state. So to prove that, we do ask for your certificate of good standing and that you're up to date on your taxes by submitting a stamped tax clearance form. So again, the form you submit to the Department of Tax, they approve it, then you send the approved copy to us. Please do not send us the blank copy or the unapproved form because we don't approve it. Okay, although we're state, we're a different department. And then financial information, this is just to make sure that the company is doing well because this is a state grant and the purpose of it is for economic development. So again, a review committee determines the disbursement of funding. And then again, when you're filling out the application, just keep that in mind. The stuff in the yellow is for manufacturing activities that result in economic and employment growth in Hawaii. And if you guys have any questions, you can talk to me or Wayne. And there's also Aaron in the back. We can answer your questions about the manufacturing assistance program. Same thing for Outer Island. Feel free to contact us. Manufacturing grant specific questions, maybe contact mfggrant@hcdc.org. We have a dedicated person monitoring that, and they can answer your questions also. Okay? All right, so I think we're going to sum it up with workforce. Rob, maybe you can go to the next slide. Oh, this is just a duplicate, sorry. So workforce. So I think for this one is mainly the questions we'd like to ask you guys because we're sort of running out of time is how do you find and train workers and how do you retain them?
Me, team of 4. So like I said before, I have a team of 4. Most of them actually started as interns and graduated into employees. UH has a really great program in their fashion industry where they require internships, so that's where I've done most of my recruitment. How I keep them, I learned that paying them what they deserve is best. I'm still a small company, so I'm probably underpaying them. But we treat each other like family. But what I want to say about workforce is despite only having four of us, I still have a giant organizational chart planned out because I do know where I want my business to be. I do know what departments eventually I want to create and how they're going to run and how many people work them. So we all stare at this giant org chart together and we organize each person's role. So right now there's only 4 of us, so we each kind of fill multiple shoes. and that details their workflow and their responsibilities. And I try to keep that hyper organized just to help running lean. If everyone knows their job description and expectations, it just makes the workflow more efficient. And then we all know where we need to go. And we decide as a team who's the next person to go on the team based on need. And we look at the budget and we forecast out when can we bring on that next person. So for example, my next person is another sales staff person to run retail. And then after that, it would be another production assistant. So I have a plan, and it all part of the bigger picture. And the more organized you can get on that you know the direction you're going, you know where the company goals are, and you know what you need to be looking for along the way to get there.
Yeah, workforce is a problem. I'm a handmade chocolate factory. Every piece of candy we make, 1 million pounds a year, is one piece at a time by hand, which means you need a very dedicated and special type of worker. I would say 1% of the human population can hand make chocolate, or you're going to get carpal tunnel. You have to have a natural talent for it. I have an aging workforce. The interesting part about my workforce is the older they get, the better they get. My oldest candy maker retired at 82 years old. And her productivity was there. Her eyesight was going. So we kind of had to tell her it's, and she agreed. My lead candy maker retired last year. She was 78. And the kids could not keep up with her. It's not a productivity thing for us. One thing we're very proud of is that our turnover rate is 1% over 30 years. People work for us, they stay with us. And the reason we do that is we treat workers like family. I mean, we literally treat them like family. In the chocolate business, we don't do the general wholesale. We used to be at Long's and Costco and all this. We bailed out of that. So we're more of a specialty type of, we'll produce on demand, which means there's downtime. But I will take care of my workers on downtime. Even when they're working under 20 hours a week and it happens, they're still on a Cadillac medical plan. We give them all the bills, and I have a lot of workers who go overseas for family vacations. Well, a week is not going to cut it for them because their travel expenses are high. They'll be unpaid, but they'll take a month off, and we'll schedule that in. We accommodate the workers, but we expect the productivity back when the crunch time comes. And that's how we've handled our workforce. So for me, workforce retention isn't a problem, finding new workers. If you guys have to deal with, I call the kids, the millennials coming into the workforce, who are coming in from a Disneyland fantasy point of view of what work is and productivity and all of this, and I've learned one thing: you will not change the way they think. You will not. They have separate core values that are different from us. Okay? Over time, as they get more mature and find out that they're 35 years old and still got a paper hat with a little name tag that says Bob turning hamburgers, they made a career choice failure. But until they realize that they've got to kick it up a notch, you're stuck with this workforce. But they're very smart. It's how do you use their ambition and their energy into your productivity. And a lot of us have to change the way we think productivity works. I don't think anybody's found the magic bullet for that yet. I'm working. I've got a couple of young people working with us now, and it's really interesting. Okay, a lot of it has to be with communication. I've got to think young. I can't be the old futt sitting upstairs in the office just because they're not going to relate to you, and they're not going to relate to what you're trying to do because you're them and they're us kind of deal. So I think it's a lot of that. You can't get productivity from new workers. You have to go about it a different way. I think the days of hand-making chocolate, I see the writing on the wall. I will not be able to maintain that. I may be able to set up a specialty section with higher value added for that type of product, but in general manufacturing, I'm going to have to move to a different type of manufacturing process. And that's a given. That's acceptable. We just have to do it to maintain the product quality level that I want. Okay? I am not going to step down my product quality level just because I have to go to automation. Really old school, I'd shut down the business if I had to compromise my quality. I'm that comfortable with the fact that if I can't make the best product I can possibly make, I don't want to do this anymore. Okay? I've been doing this for 47 years. I kind of got the luxury of going like, okay. It's a little easier. My mom and my dad started and really built the business. They've got a lot of money. I don't got to worry about mom and dad. Yeah, so I don't have that kind of stress. And I've gotten to understand that businesses are a living thing. They're not static. You build a business plan, it has to be flexible enough to grow with the environment. Okay, and that's what I've seen, because I was the young kid when I started, right? And I thought really different from what my parents thought. And as I got older, I understood what they were doing, but I could see some things didn't fit. Okay, and that's just what you got to deal with. So manpower, workforce, there is a workforce out there. You've got to learn how to deal with it. Okay, and that's what I think we've got to learn as the bosses and people running businesses nowadays.
So we have, I think I did the count recently, but we have over 400 employees that work at the retail level and the manufacturing level. So it's safe to say when I first came in, I was pretty anxious on how I would fit in with everybody, how I could prove myself to them, and et cetera, et cetera. But I think something that we do really good is, because we're still a family business. We're family run. My parents are the president, CEO, and then the VP, and then I'm the general manager. So us three are kind of top-down leadership, and then we don't micromanage in any way. We definitely trust everybody we hire. And like Neal said, if our workforce does need to go, a lot of them are Filipino, so a lot of them do go back to the Philippines and require a month. We don't, they do take the unpaid vacation, but we allow them to go to the Philippines, visit their family. They do have that work-life balance that we do allow for them. We take care of our people as much as possible, and I think that does stem from, because I don't think manufacturing is the sexiest job where people want to come in, and it's really hard to find staff. So what we try to focus on is retention. I don't think we have a 1% retention over 30 years, that's for sure. But we are putting into place what we need to keep them. That's whether it's benefits that we give them. We give them profit sharing. We give them bonuses 4 times a year. On top of that, the way my parents set up the company ahead of time, they were looking for the best interests and how to share the wealth that they would gain and the profits that they would gain from the business and trickle it back down to the team. And over 400 people spread out, it may not seem like a huge amount, but it's more than, we're not there to keep all the profits. We're there to distribute it back to the workforce. We're there to, we have this 401k program. Sorry, I'm just kind of selling the company now at this point, but we have this 401k program where we just give them 3% of their gross pay. It's not even a matching thing. So regardless if they contribute or not, and at the end of the year, if we're profitable, we give them an extra 2% on top of that. So, that's like, I don't know what that comes out to, but I think it averaged out to like $1,500 extra on top of their pay. So it really, we're there just trying to make sure they benefit, and the hours are consistent for them as well. Some people are enticed to go to the hotels because they do have these hiring sprees all the time. But when they get there, they realize that they're just another cog in the wheel, and they're there. They're not going to get their hours. They can't pay their bills because they're living from paycheck to paycheck. But we can supply them, a very consistent hourly schedule. We can provide them the schedule that they need to supply their family for what they have to pay for on their expenses on a day-to-day basis. On top of that, in terms of just more structure, I think because we have such a big workforce, it's really difficult to manage unless you have standardized processes in place. So we have an SOP, standardized operating procedure, for everything that we do, honestly. Everything from admin, retail, and manufacturing, there is an SOP for every single process. And it took a long time to create this Bible of work, and we have to constantly update it. But without it, there would be no reference point on how to do a certain process and the most effective way to do it, because we've already figured it out, but we just have to write it down. Another thing as well is we cross-train all of our employees. So everybody in baking is cross-trained. It's a very laborious process. Everything is not handmade in the sense that, we have pineapple-shaped cookie cutters, and that's how we create our cookie. No, it's wire cut through a machine. But on top of that, that pan is being taken to a rack, and that's by a person. That rack is being pushed into an oven. That's by a person. If there's different processes within our overall baking processes, but every person in the bakery knows how to do everybody else's job, so we can rotate them. And on top of that, to keep things fair, we do skills training. So skills training applies that knowledge of cross-training to actually determine essentially what we rank them, because we have to do performance evaluation so it's fair for everybody. Not one person can work less than another. Everybody has to be on the same level playing field, and there is a minimum standard that they have to keep up to. or they are coached, and we do give them the opportunity to come out of it. But we also make sure they're trained up to the standard that we set for them. So I think those are very important, to make sure you skills train frequently, and we do it on a quarterly basis, where they have to go to different sections and they're working the wrapper that day, and we make sure they abide by the standard. They're doing chocolate dipping that day. They're not always working in those same departments, but they should know, and that allows us to be as fluid as possible. Whenever someone calls out sick or we're short-staffed, we already know, we can send this person to that department, no problem. Maybe they won't be as effective as and efficient as that, the home crew of people that are working in chocolate dipping, but we know they can do it at least. So that's extremely important, is having that flexibility and fluidity with our workforce.
Yep. So I think we're open for questions now, because we're a little bit over. I apologize for that, but thank you for sticking around. I think this will conclude my portion of the panel, but we're here to answer any of your questions that you guys may have.
Just want to say thank you very much for your honest perspective, your experiences. Every one of you have a story, and that's what I gain a lot of value from. That it's not a straight path, that there are ups and downs and mistakes made. So it's good to have also kind of the young and the older type wisdom. Well, wisdom, but it's a good perspective to have both of those, and I really valued that. And also yourself as a growing company, to bring that perspective and having used their program. So lots of great information. Thank you.
Questions, please.
I definitely concur with that gentleman over there. I did like the variety of experiences, and I love to live vicariously through other people's experiences, but as they did specify, sometimes your greatest growth curves occur during those moments of failure or moments of mishaps. But again, they're always great learning opportunities. And thank you so much for sharing those valuable experiences with us. I know how painful they are. We've gone through some challenging experiences within the past few years, so we totally appreciate that. And especially the empathy part. Empathizing and understanding everybody else's needs in the room as well.
Well, the one thing I want to kind of, this is an export, and export is kind of what I do. So keep it in perspective to me. Scaling up your operation for export is just one component of exporting. Okay, there's other things you got to take in. Just because you can produce a product doesn't mean it's there. Okay, there's other things you got to consider. So you got to continue to come to these seminars and forums so you can learn the component parts. Application is everything. Okay, I run a lot. I go to a lot of these seminars, and I get to speak at a lot of these seminars, and I notice a lot of companies don't have the correct vision of export. It's kind of like half wishful thinking and half I want to do it, so I'm going to do it without getting well grounded in what you're actually getting into. Yeah. So coming to these seminars and getting education is really your first step. You really got to get educated before you take the step.
Neal gave me a great segue to say, here's our Hawaii Pacific Export Council YouTube channel, and this is our archive of the seminars that we've done in the past, covering a wide range of topics that have nothing to do with scaling up operations, but such as marketing in Japan, or export financing, or how to implement an international trade show, things like that. The topics are varied. We do roughly 7 or 8 per year. We just did one in December for the first time, focused on exporting of agriculture, which I thought was really interesting, working with the Hawaii State Department of Agriculture people and talking about topics that we need to talk about in Hawaii, because agriculture is a major growing export. We've done a seminar on exporting of engineering services and architecture services and services in general. That was a very interesting one. E-commerce for exporters. So please look here and keep an eye on the DBET website, invest.hawaii.gov. the Hawaii Pacific Export Council website at hawaiiexportsupport.com. And there's plenty of resources in our ecosystem here in Hawaii to help you with exporting. We do a really good job in Hawaii compared to other states, I believe, in terms of supporting our exporters. Whether you're new to exporting or you already export, I think we do a very good job here of helping. So please reach out for help, and there's lots of people who are available to assist. Do you have any final comments?
Before we close, again, I just want to thank our panel again, Summer, Neal, and Ryan, for coming and spending time with us this morning. Thank you. And then,
thank you so much.
The other way, thank you for being a good moderator. I know he spent a lot of time putting the slides together, so thank you, Wayne, for putting it together for us.
Thank you.
And also our host, Rob, and his staff for videotaping, and all of our partners for being here. So on behalf of Innovate Hawaii, I just want to thank everybody for coming this morning and spending some time with us. If you have any questions, please reach out either through Rob or through any of us. We'll still be here. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you.